It's Friday, August 12th, 2022. I'm Jackson Bird. Today, could chewing gum and micro-robots replace your toothbrush? Plus a Lord Byron-themed RPG, and get paid to indulge in every pumpkin-spiced item at Trader Joe's. Here's some cool stuff for your ride home. With some minor updates, we've basically been brushing our teeth the same way for millennia, by putting sticks with bristles on them into our mouths and removing the plaque, or biofilm. Sure, now we've got electric toothbrushes you buy from podcast ads, as well as flossing, deep mechanical cleanings from dentists, an array of fluoride and non-fluoride mouthwashes, and tons of advances in dental surgery. Yes, overall, we've come a long way since the days of Doc Holliday and his assertion that the only tool a dentist needs is a good pair of pliers. But the day-to-day act of brushing, that is a concept that's been relatively unchanged. Perhaps not for long. Dentists and engineers meeting earlier this summer at the Center for Innovation in Precision Dentistry's first ever symposium have some pretty incredible ideas about what the future of dentistry could look like. Beryl Leaf Benderly covered the symposium for Neo-Life. Biochemist Henry Daniel and biomolecular engineer Dion Lee are working on a chewing gum that could destroy the biofilm on your teeth, essentially accomplishing the act of brushing to remove plaque, while also delivering a bevy of custom pharmaceuticals. Now, as the necessity of going to the dentist and the array of other interventions were recommended beyond simply brushing twice a day might indicate, simple brushing is not really enough to effectively get rid of the biofilm that coats our teeth in between cleanings. Neo-Life explains that the microbe-laden biofilm contains a matrix of polymers that protect those microbes and resist removal. So coming up with more effective solutions would be a huge boon to better dental health for all. But all of the scientists working in this advanced field are also hoping to make dental health solutions more equitable. Their goal is low-cost, scalable solutions that could be rolled out in low-income communities specifically, who often suffer the worst effects of lack of access to dental care. Many of their solutions would also be more accessible for some people with disabilities compared to the standard toothbrush. So, this chewing gum, quoting Neo-Life, Daniel produces biofilm-fighting enzymes, among numerous other potentially useful proteins, with a patented novel process that grows them in plants. Bombarding them with the DNA of the desired protein causes the chloroplasts, which are intercellular elements of all green plants, to take up the genetic material and produce the desired molecules in their leaves. Once the plants are grown, the molecules of interest are extracted, freeze-dried, and ground up, creating powder ready to be packed into a pill or added to a gum. But to be effective against biofilm, the enzymes must be protected on the way past the mouth's salivary defenses, which ordinarily can break them down. That's where the special gum, which has been engineered with features that keep the enzymes intact, comes in. End quote. And here's a cool little footnote. They've been experimenting with putting an ACE2 enzyme in the gum, which has shown great promise in reducing and preventing SARS-CoV-2 infections. Great enough promise that the FDA approved it for clinical trials. Imagine a gum that cleans your teeth better than a toothbrush and protects you from COVID. Seriously cool stuff. And I can't help but think about all the mid-century retrofuturism ideas about how we'd be eating meals in pill or chewing gum form by now. And as I said recently, I am of the opinion that that has never quite happened because most people like to enjoy their food. And especially as we become more physically disconnected in many parts of our lives, the act of gathering and of breaking bread together has become even more valuable. However, maybe chewing gum will become how we clean our teeth after eating, instead of becoming the meal itself. Or perhaps the winning solution will be micro-robots. Another team led by dental school professor and co-director of the research center that hosted the symposium, Hyun-Michel Koo, has been experimenting with nanoparticles and micro-robots for teeth cleaning. Quoting again, Koo and colleagues had experimented with nanoparticles that contain iron oxide, which through catalytic action can cause hydrogen peroxide to release free radicals that can break up biofilms. Through a friend, he learned of work in the engineering school with a very similar kind of iron oxide-containing nanoparticles. The engineers, however, were turning them into micro-robots by using magnetic fields to guide them in specific movements. What about guiding them across, around, and among teeth? Together, the groups devised two different systems for what they call catalytic antimicrobial robots to break down and remove biofilms. The first approach suspends nanoparticles in a solution, and the second embeds them in gels molded into various three-dimensional forms. The nanoparticles clear biofilms from surfaces like the front of your teeth, much as snowplow clears snow, and also from enclosed spaces and narrow passages, such as tight spaces between teeth. End quote. Tests showed that the nanoparticles cleared the biofilm so completely that they have little chance of growing back. Plus, the nanoparticles are already FDA approved, only cost a couple of cents per gram, and have been found to additionally treat iron deficiency anemia, which is another common health condition in the low-income communities the team is already targeting for improved dental solutions. A whole new world of dental hygiene could be on the horizon. And as Benderly put it in Neolife, yes, engineers and dentists have collaborated before, but this new research center might be able to provide the financial backing and resources to finally put a lot of ideas over the edge into actual practice. After the Mary Shelley segment on Wednesday, I've got a couple of lingering Mary Shelley adjacent stories for you. So first, Oliver Darkshire, who runs the popular Twitter account for the London-based antique bookstore Southrons, has created a Lord Byron-themed RPG. Now, Lord Byron was, of course, the paramour poet who suggested that he and his guests embark on a ghost story writing challenge while holed up in a villa in Geneva that year without a summer. One of the stories that came out of those stormy nights in the villa became Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. The group of writers and friends weren't just escaping the bad weather that summer, though. They were also escaping a myriad of social scandals. Lord Byron was a larger-than-life character whose eccentricities and sexual appetite remain the stuff of legend 2 centuries later. If you know much about him, this one-page RPG will give you a pretty good laugh, and if you're less familiar with him, some of these examples will give you an idea of just what I'm talking about. So the RPG, which Boing Boing notes is more of a fun joke than really playable, is called Trapped in a Cabin with Lord Byron. Even just from the title, I'm in. I don't even play RPGs, and I love it. I mean, someone give me a literary horror comedy film of the same name this fall. I need it. So the crux of this RPG is that you are on vacation with Lord Byron at his holiday home, but the poor weather has trapped you indoors. You have 3 main scores in the game: Scandal, Masterpiece, and Stress. You take turns rolling a 6-sided die to get a new Byronic event, which either adds or deducts points from your Scandal, Masterpiece, or Stress. As Darkshire wrote in the rules, quote, "If your scandal reaches 10, you are no longer fit to enter society and must flee to nurse your reputation. If your masterpiece reaches 10, you create a new genre of supernatural horror fiction based on your time with Byron. And if your stress reaches 10, you lose your patience with the man and either kill him in a fit of rage or otherwise descend into uncontrollable weeping from which you never emerge." End quote. Some of the Byronic events include: Is he aware the walls are exceptionally thin? +1 stress. May he borrow your husband? Of course. -1 stress, +1 scandal. He's brought his pet bear. It is not trained. +2 stress. But even worse, he wants to read you his poetry. +3 stress. He has an excellent supply of contraband substances. +1 scandal. +1 masterpiece. He broke up with his latest girlfriend/boyfriend, +2 scandal. He passed out in his study, +1 masterpiece. There's also this excellent addendum: if you roll a 6 3 times in a row, you unlock the Disaster Muse. Lord Byron destroys your manuscript either by accident or on purpose during one of his episodes. You must reset your masterpiece score to 0. I'm linking to the PDF in the show notes if you want to check it out. Perhaps you'd like to play it sometime when you're trapped in an Airbnb with your own insufferably creative friends. Now, the other bit of lingering Mary Shelley information I wanted to share was referenced by Emily Temple in Literary Hub in the piece about this RPG. Astronomers at Texas State University back in 2011 figured out the time and date that Mary Shelley first came up with the idea for Frankenstein. It was sometime between 2 and 3 a.m. on June 16th, 1816, while trapped in a villa with Lord Byron in Geneva. They used a combination of Shelley's own description of her moment of inspiration from the preface of the third edition of her novel, and cross-checked that with the lunar cycle of June of 1816. See, based both on the diaries of Lord Byron's physician John Polidori about their time at the villa, and presumptions that a teenage girl couldn't possibly have come up with such a rich and complex story in such a short frame of time, many over the years have suspected that she actually took nearly a week to come up with the story, and didn't just come up with it within a few days after Lord Byron first proposed the Ghost Story Challenge. So, using the dates from Polidori's diaries, there's basically the theory that she came up with the story right away on June 16th, or agonized over it until June 22nd. In the preface, Shelley mentions that the idea came to her during a sleepless night when, quote, the moonlight was struggling to get through her closed shutters. But Donald Olson from Texas State University says that the moon on June 22nd was a waning crescent, not nearly bright enough to shed light through closed shutters. On June 16th, however, it was a bright gibbous moon, and so long as Shelley wasn't fabricating that small detail of her account in order to fool astronomers 200 years later, we can trust that she really did come up with this genre-defining story in a matter of days on June 16th. Olson and his team have also used data on lunar cycles, tides, and more to pinpoint the exact time and date for paintings by Vincent van Gogh and Edvard Munch, as well as historical events like Caesar's invasion of Britain. It's not the most earth-shattering of discoveries in the world, but it's still pretty interesting. -1 scandal, +1 masterpiece. Pumpkin spice season is nigh. I recently reported that my local Stop & Shop already has pumpkin-shaped candies on the shelves, and Dunkin' Donuts has just announced the earliest ever start to their fall menu. Starting this Wednesday, August 17th, you can enjoy Dunkin's Pumpkin Cream Cold Brew, Pumpkin Spice Signature Latte, Pumpkin Donuts, and Muffins, as well as their new Blood Orange Dunkin' Refresher, which is tart cranberry and blood orange with subtle fall spices like ginger and cinnamon. Dunkin' has been beating Starbucks to the punch in the past few years, typically launching their fall menu about a week before the Seattle-based coffee maker. Last year, Starbucks launched Pumpkin Spice Season on August 25th, but this year, if a signboard posted by a barista on Reddit yesterday is to be believed, Starbucks is waiting until August 30th to launch their own pumpkin spice line. So once PSLs are back, if you hear anyone complaining about how it's too early for pumpkin spice lattes and all this fall stuff just keeps getting earlier and earlier, you can tell them this is actually the latest Starbucks has launched it in years. But if you are truly a pumpkin spice fiend, you might be interested in this side gig posting from personal finance company Finance Buzz. They're looking for a pumpkin spice pundit to test every single fall-themed item at Trader Joe's and get paid $1,000 to do it. Why? Finance Buzz posts a lot of advice on budgeting, especially things like grocery store hacks. So they're looking for someone to rate and review every item in the Trader Joe's autumn lineup so that they can use that market research to tell folks which products are worth budgeting for and which ones to skip. You'll get a $500 Trader Joe's gift card to buy all the items in person, and then a $1,000 fee on top of that once you've posted a photo and written a brief description of every item you try. This actually sounds a lot like a challenge I came up with for myself a few years back that I never ended up doing. I thought it might make some good hashtag video content if I ate nothing but pumpkin spice foods for an entire week. Like Finance Buzz lists as examples, this would have meant things like pumpkin waffles and cereal for breakfast, pumpkin ravioli and pumpkin samosas for dinner, and of course tons of pumpkin spice donuts and pumpkin spice beer for dessert. There are more than enough pumpkin spice items in stores these days to pull it off. The only problem is, actually having to eat it all. I'll never forget when my cold brain-addled friend thought it would be funny to buy pumpkin spice cough drops. Maybe the worst mistake of his life. But if pumpkin spice cough drops, or whatever winds up being on Trader Joe's fall lineup when it launches in September, sounds like your idea of a good time, maybe consider becoming Finance Buzz's pumpkin spice pundit and get paid to indulge. And if you want to learn more about how this whole pumpkin spice phenomenon got started and why it may wane over time but never completely go away, I did a segment on that 2 pumpkin spice seasons ago, link in the show notes. Well, alright, that is going to be about it for me for this week. As always, this show was produced by Ride Home Media. I'm Jackson Bird, and I will talk to you again on Monday. Have a great weekend.